Who's someone you went to school worked with that went to jail for something pretty bad? A guy I went to school with and his girlfriend murdered her parents because they were going to send her to school in a different state. Our 20-year high school reunion is coming up next year. It's weird to think that he'll have 7 years remaining in prison after that. It'd be even weirder if he got out before the reunion and showed up. One of my ex-boyfriends went to jail for molesting a girl, did his time and got out. Then he raped another underage girl and was convicted of second-degree rape and went back to jail. The other inmates found out why he was there and ganged up on him and killed him. All of this happened after he and I had broken up. We only dated for about a month in high school. I had no idea he had this side to him. Honestly, I'm pro rehabilitation and everything, but he deserved it. After the second time he absolutely lost the benefit of the doubt. My commander and supply sergeant from Iraq were found guilty of selling army gear on eBay. They thought they were smart by misspelling things like Tazagan and body armor. Idiots. Even if they weren't in Italy caught, eventually someone would have noticed the missing gear during an inventory check, for example, and tipped off the Criminal Investigation Division or JAG. For 5 years, I was in homeroom with a guy whose last name was after mine in alphabetical order. His locker was usually next to mine for the same reason. The summer after we graduated high school, I heard he plead guilty to molesting a 7-year-old. The dude was a little awkward, but I never would have guessed he had a thing for first graders. Kid in the grade above me got a 10-year prison sentence for child P. Apparently he found some Tumblr page with that content and saved all the images he could. Kid that was a year above me was caught once for messaging a 13-year-old girl, asking for nudes and told her they could be in a relationship if she wanted. I think he was like 21 or 22 at this point. He got probation for that, no internet access and couldn't be within 300 feet of schools, I believe. Shortly after, he got in trouble again for doing essentially the same thing to a 14-year-old girl and is now in jail for I believe 10 years. His mom to this day says he's innocent and that the two girls were little hoes. He also had child P on his phone computer both times. Had this kid on my campus who sold Xanax. The campus I went to was pretty small, so at lunch he would sell to the kids. Just a class later half the school would be fricked up of Xanax and getting sent home. Police showed up one day and arrested the kid, finding over 100 bars on him at school. I can answer this one. When I went to uni, 2003 to 2006, I was in the drama society. For one of the musical productions we did, we brought in a director and musical director, both students, just not active members of the drama society. Director seemed like a nice guy till he started going out with someone on our course and wasn't great to her. No violence, just psychological crap. A few years ago his face pops up in the news as he had murdered his fiancée, not the girl he was going out with at uni. Put her body in a suitcase in the garage and told her family she had left him and gone abroad. All the while faking text messages from her to his phone to show them. He even had her family round over Christmas while her body was in the garage. Holy frick. Guy I went to school with, partied with, hung out with was beating his wife one night and the cops were called and he then shot and killed one of the responding deputies. No prison for him though, as he too, very deservedly, died in the gunfight. Good. School bully ended up being a child molester, was molesting a relative of his, caught red-handed. I feel sorry for his family, they took it pretty bad I think. I'm not taking the pun bait, but I will say that for all the concern about stranger danger, it's the people in your circle of trust who are most likely to crime you and yours. I went to a pretty wealthy high school. There was this guy in my grade who always pretty popular, very rich, kinda pretentious, could be a dong at times, but overall a pretty decent guy. We weren't super close, but a few years after high school he messaged me asking how I was. We talked about me studying abroad. His messages were kinda garbled, numbers in the middle of words, misspellings of very basic words, etc. Which was kinda weird because he had always been pretty smart, but I didn't think much of it. About 5 years later, I found out he murdered his ex-girlfriend that he was living with. He went to jail and ended up killing himself in his cell 2 years later. As it turns out, he had started using drugs around the age of 17. H&M, most likely to self-medicate for his slowly developing schizophrenia. It's sad how many devastating things could have been prevented with a more comprehensive mental health care system. I knew this was going BSZ. It's sad how it changes you. But PLS, remember readers, 99% of SZ are non-violent. One for murder for like $200. One for murder because of an argument over the NBA playoffs. And a couple for drugs. My sister worked with a guy who killed his parents and I think a grandparent and tried to kill his aunt, uncle and cousins but was subdued by his uncle. A co-worker murdered his wife, who also worked at our company. They were getting separated. He showed up to the house she was staying in. A fight escalated to where he pulled out a kitchen knife and repeatedly stabbed her. Another former co-worker I found out shot his mom. He was always a little unstable, and his family was pushing for him to go into a psych ward, but he got life. A lot of turnover at the post office. He drove a truck through the front of a liquor store. I don't know how much time he was sentenced. This was a few years ago, so he's probably out now. From what I understand, nobody was injured because it was late at night and the place was closed. A kid who I went to high school with was very angry at the world because of reasons. I left town for college and I read an article about this kid getting arrested for arson. Rather than leaving the scene of the crime, he stood there and watched it burn and waited for the cops. Man, was he an angry kid. Whole new definition to watching the world burn. A kid that lived down the street from me later went to prison for filming pornographic movies with his wife and a 10 or 11-year-old child. I think we were in our early 20s when that happened. I lost touch with him when we went to different high schools, but we were friends all through middle school and junior high. An older guy, early 20s, I worked with at a local Taco Bell when I was in high school, disappeared. He didn't show up for work one day, which wasn't uncommon for kids, but he'd been there for a couple of years, so it was out of character for him. A couple of days later, his parents called looking for him. Finally, a detective shows up and asks everyone when they last saw him. 6 weeks later, they find him in a Mexican jail way down in southern Baja. The locals had finally notified the US Embassy. He'd gotten busted with a huge bag of pot. It took another 6 weeks to get him out of jail and back to the States. He came by when I was working and chatted a little bit, but he left and I never saw him again. After all the people murdering their parents and being caught doing child P or torturing mentally handicapped young adults, the weed seems absolutely harmless at this point. A guy I went to college with went to jail for sucker punching an 80-year-old black man and breaking his jaw. It was apparently part of a knockout game and was considered a hate crime. What is crazy is I met the guy doing archaeological field work on an old plantation in Louisiana. We were excavating slave cabins as part of a research project. Our professor's work was to better tell the story of how the West Africans' culture changed through time after being forced to come to America. During this time there was never even a glimmer of racism that came from this guy, and he was totally professional. He was sober and regularly attending AA meetings during the month we were out there, but it appeared he relapsed. I got two. One of my high school bullies ended up playing Russian roulette with this other drunk kid at a party, except it was with a handgun. One real bullet and the rest were blanks. The other kid ended up killing himself, which sucks because he was a really good kid, just had really bad depression. They ended up not calling the cops until hours later. The high school bully is now in jail for like 20 years for having a gun, drugs, and a few other things. Another bully was served an arrest warrant for having illegal guns and selling coke, which he was cutting with FET. He locked himself in his room, did a frick ton of coke, posted a status on Facebook about how the cops won't get him, and shot himself. So I guess he didn't make it to jail, but still, both were terrible people and I honestly think the world is a better place without them. Some people you are sad when they die. Most people, you are indifferent when they die. Then there are the ones that make your freaking day when they die. I went to high school with the Aurora, CO shooter. On the flip side, I also was at the same high school as Kelly Tran, so you get all sorts. Guy I worked with worked 2 jobs and had hardly any free time but is now imprisoned for 8 years for groping his daughter's 10-year-old friends. Would have never expected it. Talked to the dude every day and he seemed normal. Too bad he wasn't a Stanford swimmer. A guy I went to HS with and dated for a bit went to prison in Utah for vehicular manslaughter. From what I heard, he was driving drunk and hit another car. He killed 2 people. Guy that graduated a year ahead of me caught a barn on fire. Tried to run over a cop, which led to a high-speed police chase. Wrecked the car, ran on foot, then pulled a gun and tried to shoot a cop while on drugs. This was 2016 or early 2017. I imagine he will be in jail for a good long while, but he was a legitimately good guy all through high school. It is scary and sad how much drugs change people. Have a guy that works for me that spent 10 years in jail for shooting a guy that was raping his daughter. Not sure he went to jail for doing something bad. He is one of my best employees. Bonus: the guy he shot was the cousin of my other employees. Weird how the police will put you in jail for doing the job they're supposed to do. Not someone I went to school with, but his dad. One of my good friends. His dad was arrested for the murder of his wife, my friend's mom, years earlier. It was obviously a huge shock, as he was told all through his life that his mom had died in some normal way. My friend had to go live with relatives as he was raised by just his dad. Your poor friend. What a horrible thing to have to live with. Guy I went to school with and some of his family and friends were arrested for running a $1 million H ring. They were charged with multiple ODs and deaths because of this. My older brother's best friend went away for about 10 years for trying to rob some kids outside a store. Didn't go as planned. He eventually came back and then within a year raped my girlfriend. I met her a little bit after he went away and it was all good till he slipped her drugs at a party. Some people should stay in jail. A guy I went to HS with is in jail for murder, and there's also one in there for child P, and another for international drug trafficking. If they were all the same person, I was gonna say he has an honor roll in the crime world. I knew a guy from school that ended up murdering and burning the body of another man who allegedly was interested in murder dude's girlfriend. Unrelated to the murder, but I used to have a thing for murder dude's sister. Looking back on it now, I'm glad that never came to fruition. A distant relative of mine I went to school with got mixed up with his father selling drugs for the Aryan Brotherhood. Story goes that an undercover cop tried to set up a buy with them and the ad knew about it. So as an initiation they had this kid kill him. He committed the murder just after turning 18, so he was tried as an adult and got life in prison. Him and his father are gonna rot in jail. That's pretty sad. Fricked up his entire life to be a racist like his dad. Okay, so I got sent away for 10 days, in middle school, to a neighboring school for punching a teacher. Won't go into that, but if you got suspended out of school it was for something severe. When at the neighboring school I saw a familiar face, a gentleman named Bruce. He was in for body slamming the dean. About 4 years later I saw his face on the news. He was arrested for sex trafficking. Didn't really surprise me, a lot of the people that I was suspended with were pretty troubled kids, a lot of them gang members. A guy I went to high school with got caught accessing child P he had on Dropbox through his school issued iPad. It was of very young kids. He even admitted to the police his favorite featured a 2-year-old. Disgusting stuff. Anyways, he was out on bail and decided his life sucked and to enact revenge. He went into the local library with a knife in his backpack, walked into a room that was hosting a children's chess club and shouted, "I'm going to kill some people." The coach, who was a 75-year-old retired military vet, stopped him barehanded and managed to pin him down while the kids and parents ran out and got help. Nobody was hurt except for the coach, whose hand was badly cut, but he recovered and has since been recognized for his heroism. After all of this happened, it came out that his older brother sexually abused him when he was a kid, which obviously doesn't excuse his actions, but makes the whole situation even sadder. A guy I served in the military with got 20 years for battering his infant daughter to death. Apparently she wouldn't stop crying. A baby screaming in your face can drive you insane. It definitely does to me. The best advice I got when our first kiddo was born is that if you're starting to lose it, put the baby down, walk away, and take 15 minutes to let your temper cool off, or call your spouse over and hand the baby off. I had a good friend in school that came from what appeared to be a stable, healthy family with a big house. and all the video games he wanted. Completely the opposite of my own family, so I'd always go over to his place to play SNES, Chrono Trigger, and his mom would make me dinner. Then randomly, him and another guy I didn't know stabbed and beat the parents to death in their sleep, chopped up their bodies, stuffed them into the trunk of the car in the garage, took out as much money as they could from their accounts, and went on a joyride spending spree that ended only a day later. Open and shut case. Evidence littered everywhere. Didn't even try hard to hide it. Jail for life without parole. Not the death penalty, because we were minors at the time. Case came up for appeal again a few years ago under some technical ground, and was upheld. It's still surreal as heck to think about. I think that other guy who didn't know was actually the devil himself. Kid I went to grade school with went to jail for fricking a goat. He got out a few years later, got super drunk with his cousin. They were underwear off, ready to do the hot tamale when she came to her senses and said no. He, being fresh out of jail, super frisky, super drunk, and a dumbass said too bad. She disagreed with this turn of events, and expressed it by caving in his skull with the brass lampshade on the bedside table. After an extended stay in the hospital he got to go back to his concrete mansion for attempted rape sexual assault act. As far as I know he's still there. 2. First one, he dropped out of school, joined a gang, stabbed someone and is now being transferred to a prison. Second, all-star football player, gets accepted to a really nice Cali school, literally have a school assembly to watch the kid pick between the two Californian schools. Kid has big football career lined up, NFL already watching, proceeds to drug and rape 3 girls. All I can say now is Kappa. A guy I went to school with went to prison for molesting his little half sisters for years. They were 10-12 years younger than him. Went to school with this piece of crap who on Boxing Day a couple of years ago stole his mum's car and ran over 2 couples right across the road from my auntie. 3 dead and 1 was in a coma. All family friends and well loved in the local community. I've dug up the link to the news article but decided not to share. The scum doesn't deserve any recognition. 1 murdered his friend out in El Pozo. His friends and him took the guy out to the desert and shot him execution style from behind. His buddies were planning on only kicking his butt, and ratted the dude out for murder afterwards. Another guy is in jail for arson. I don't know the story but he got caught on a home security camera lighting a car on fire. I was friends with that guy and he was very nice. I was surprised. This is all after graduating 3 years ago. Not sure exactly who he was but a guy that went to HS with my brother and I shot a lady in the face and burned down the gas station that was close to an elementary school. Pretty average, normal kid. Started dating one of the cheerleaders after graduation. The couple got caught at the airport, trying to smuggle a few pounds of ecstasy. A few years back, I was sitting at my desk and saw 3 police officers come in with an our person. They walked up to a co-worker of mine and escorted him out. I assumed he was in trouble with some HR work related. Found out later he was arrested for child pornography. Oddly, I wasn't shocked. I've got 2. First guy went to jail for stabbing and killing some guy in a fight at a party. He was a pretty cool guy, but definitely had a temper. Second guy went to jail for beating and molesting his girlfriend's 1.5-year-old son. I knew the dude was kind of shady, but didn't know it was that bad. Seriously, frick you Alex. Friend in high school went to prison for burglary with a firearm. He broke into a guy's house and stole a handgun and tried to sell it. Another acquaintance spent time in jail for involuntary homicide. Drunk and driving at 7 AM. Went off the road and ran over a neighbor mowing his lawn, killing him. While I was still in high school, 2004-ish, a 14-year-old I went to school with robbed a Holiday Inn, raped a woman, and then forced her into an industrial dryer before turning it on. Thankfully she survived and later testified against him. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Guy I hung out with in high school is in jail for life, no parole, for murder, theft, and gross abuse of a corpse. He and 2 other guys jumped a kid at an ATM, beat him to death with a chain, stole his bank card and car, and proceeded to drive the car around for a week with the dead body in the trunk. Prosecution initially wanted the death penalty, but the victim's parents asked them to take that off the table. Convicted to the maximum possible sentence. Always seemed like a good dude. A lot of the trial was aired on TV, and he seemed like he'd seriously lost any sense of remaining sanity. His explanations went from a drug addiction everyone knew he did not have, to being forced to kill a random stranger by the Russian mob, in a tiny, rural Midwestern USA town. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.